For years, I have worked in security at various locations in various cities. Employees at every hotel where I have worked have told me about ghost sightings and other paranormal activity. According to the legends, the ghosts are usually those of a staff member who passed away, a person who committed suicide, or a person who was murdered. Generally speaking, I don't trust any of the stories because I can usually tell when someone is lying or only reciting what they heard as their own. I've deliberately stayed in locations where others have reported seeing ghosts, and I've never seen or experienced anything that couldn't be explained by the wind, poor lighting, or simply being a spooky place. But there was one area I worked where it was really eerie, and I had an experience that I can't really begin to describe. It truly frightens me to know that I have investigated every explanation and have yet to find anything, and it has altered my perspective on ghosts and the paranormal. I've always wanted to think they were real, and now I do. It just comes down to recognizing when individuals are exaggerating, making things up, or being too terrified to see the true reason behind what transpired. In Palm Springs, California, I used to work in a hotel that was once Gene Autry's home and land. The guest rooms were situated in the south and north buildings, which made up the property. The Autry house, a large spa, a ballroom, a maintenance shed, and a security trailer are all there. Large, tall trees and plants with dirt walkways dug through them made up the landscaping that connected all the buildings. There are grassy areas, a fireplace-equipped area, a hammock-equipped area, a tennis court, 2 pools, a ping-pong table adjacent to an outdoor bar, and a petanque area, a game in which the closest balls to the main ball win. Every time I turned a corner in the south and north buildings, I believed I may run into the girls from The Shining because of the white hallways and blood-red guest rooms. The spa was dubbed Palm Springs Yacht Club, or PSYC. In addition to its eerie moniker, the decor had an antiquated nautical vibe. I detested entering because it was really dim and had numerous hallways, showers, and dim rooms that I had to inspect. The ballroom was a huge open space with a seating area in front and a kitchen linked in the back. This location was easy to lock down and wasn't very frightening. In fact, I would take my breaks there to make sure no one was bothering me. Every night, if the Autry house wasn't occupied, I had to go inside and make sure everything was clean and that the lights were out. The house was shaped like a C, with a kitchen and main room connecting the 2 wings. There was a master bedroom at the end of each wing, and a patio space with sliding glass doors to each room was located in between the master suites. Old artwork adorned the walls. Lion head faucets adorned the bathrooms, and animal skin rugs covered the floor. I detested the wooden African masks covering the wall of the north main chamber, upper right corner of the C-shape. Some of the masks were animal-shaped, while others had horns and a nasty appearance. I stopped entering either main room because I would let my mind run wild. I was afraid that if I were in one of the rooms and the intercom went off, I would glance across the patio to the other room and see someone wearing one of those masks, staring at me. The rooms had intercom systems mounted on the walls. Mac, a maintenance worker, was employed there. I used to talk to this older man all the time because he was so cool. I held him in high regard as a Green Beret in Vietnam. We would talk about life and family while he told me tales from his time in combat. Despite his seemingly normal demeanor, he was always telling tales of spirits on his land. He didn't voluntarily provide the knowledge, but he would hesitantly share some things with you if you asked him. The more I knew him, the more bizarre his tales were. He told me that while he was close by replacing a landscape light, he would notice the hammocks swinging on their own. He informed me that the lights on the tennis court would flicker on and off. He told a story about a woman he occasionally saw dancing alone in a red dress in the ballroom. In PSYC, another noteworthy anecdote concerned a guy he had spotted floating across the pool. After reading the following few stories, I began to seriously wonder if Mac enjoyed playing pranks or if he was still recovering from combat. He was adamant that the stories were accurate and eventually stopped discussing them when I really pressed him on the subject. I discovered how to ignore it. Other reports claimed to have seen a woman wearing a green shirt in the restroom mirrors. One security guard actually quit one night, claiming that as he emerged from the restroom, he noticed a woman in a green sweater standing next to the bed, staring at him silently. He quit right away and fled the room. I had to cover his shift, so I know that aspect is accurate. The last story that comes to me is from a man who worked in room service. One night, he told me, he was taking the route that went by the Patonki Court on his way to deliver an order to the Autry House. He left the food behind and started to head back, but he couldn't pass the court because all of the chairs were arranged across the walkway. He claimed he didn't see any footprints on the court, which has soft sand that lets you know when someone has been going through. He walked away from that direction and repositioned the chairs. Let me share my experience. One of my responsibilities for the evening was to check each empty room to make sure the air conditioner was set to 75 degrees, the windows were secured, the lights were off, and the room was clean or dirty. The phone on the nightstand would occasionally turn on its speaker and begin to crack as you walked into a room. I always blamed this on outdated phones and faulty wiring, presumably to keep myself from becoming too afraid to perform my duties. I was inspecting the second-floor rooms in the north building one evening. My intention was to enter room 46N. The room had all the lights on, as was customary. Beginning on the left side of the room and working my way around to the right, where I would wind up in the bathroom, I began turning off all the lights. 2 French-style doors in the bathroom led out into the space. The bathroom light was on the other side of the half-closed left door. I reached inside and turned off the light after opening the door all the way to the room's wall. It was chilling when I walked toward the room's entry hallway, and I always keep that light on so I can see when I'm leaving. I didn't find this odd because on hot days, housekeeping would occasionally turn the air conditioner down to the 60s while they were working inside. Before I could reach the thermostat next to the restroom, the door I had opened slammed shut so forcefully that the walls trembled. You must realize that there were no springs or arms attached to these doors, just hinges and a basic locking mechanism next to the handle. The slatted wood used to make the doors was extremely light. The door wouldn't have slammed if I had thrown it as hard as I could. It just took me 3 or 4 enormous steps to flee the room. Since the doors stood open, I could kill if it were intruded on. As I was drawing the door shut, the deadbolt flew out of the door and banged into the door frame. I had already opened the door and dashed through it into the hallway. I feared having to close that damn door, but I urgently reached in, flipped the switch, and shut the door against my fear. I started crying because I was so shocked by what had transpired. I concluded that without doing a little research, I couldn't really attribute the incident to the paranormal. When I returned to the room, the door was still shut. The door caught so much wind that it slowed down and hardly made it to the frame when I opened it and threw it as hard as I could. I was aware that there was no wind because the windows were shut and closed. It wasn't being drawn in by gravity because the floor wasn't uneven close to the door. It was no longer extremely cold, and when I checked the thermostat, it was set to 75 degrees. I never returned to the room after leaving it. I quickly sketched out the layout of the room. As I came down the stairs, I could smell the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. After a long, restful night's sleep, my body was still trying to wake up, so I stretched languidly when I got to the bottom. I said, "Good morning, all," as I entered the kitchen. As I walked past the stove, I glanced at my wife, Claire. With an exclamation of "Dad!" my son leapt from his seat and ran over. It never grew old. Luke was a firecracker at the age of 4. To the dismay of his mother, who was attempting to persuade him to sit still long enough to consume his Cheerios, I lifted the boy off his feet and swung him around. I hurriedly put Luke back in his small chair to finish his breakfast, after noticing Claire's agitated look. "How did you sleep, little man?" "All right, last night. Reggie visited me." I said, "Ah, yes, and how is fine Reginald doing these days?" in a condescending tone. His name is Reggie, Dad, not Reginald. Luke uttered the final syllable as though Reginald was a completely ridiculous name. Apologies. How is Reggie doing? I responded, enunciating the name. My wife shot me a dark look. I knew I shouldn't encourage this new imaginary friend my son had concocted. Claire certainly did not approve, but I honestly couldn't see the harm in it. He was 4 after all. What 4-year-old hasn't had an imaginary friend? And as we had just moved into a new home in a new village, I think it's his way of coping with being in a strange place and settling in. The move to Castlewood was somewhat unexpected. My job had offered the chance of a transfer along with a sizable promotion. It was too good of a deal to pass up. Naturally, the disadvantage was that my wife and child had very little time to adjust to our new environment due to the sudden transition. He's okay, Luke said. I glanced up at Luke. Just okay? That's too bad. What did good old Reggie have to say? Nothing much, Luke responded, drinking milk from his spoon. Just stuff. Nick, just stuff, I parroted. Yay. He claimed he doesn't like you. I feigned distress. No, Reggie, you injure me. I tickled Luke lightly, which resulted in a wave of giggles. Well, perhaps I can meet Reggie officially at your birthday party next weekend, and he will realize I'm not such a bad guy. My youngster grinned brightly and said calmly, Dad, that's absurd. Reggie is unable to attend. He has passed away. My wife was holding a spatula when I heard it clatter onto the stove. Our gazes met. I was silent for a moment before answering. You say Reggie is dead? I turned back to my son and inquired at last. My son said, sure, he's been dead for a long time, and then he put another spoonful of Cheerios in his mouth. May I go play in the garden now, Mom? I've nearly consumed the entire bowl. Claire gave Luke a small nod after appearing momentarily preoccupied. Yes, but make sure to bring your ball to the sink first. The 2 men sat watching Luke, lost in thought. Yes, Mom. With his half-full bowl of cereal already on his way to the sink, Luke yelled. Without turning around, he ran out into the back garden. I gazed at his vanishing form. What do you think that was all about? My wife was asked. I'm not sure. It's really eerie, don't you think? She answered. No at all. To be honest, I have no idea how he could have made up such a tale. You believe there's a connection? Claire gave me a contemptuous glance. Are you implying that our son is visited at night by a ghost that haunts our home? Really, John? What, you don't believe in ghosts? Obviously not. It's a bunch of bullshit. Don't tell me you genuinely think such stuff is true, please. I answered, I don't know, with a thoughtful expression. I believe that we still don't fully comprehend a lot of the cosmos. Who is to claim that there isn't something that exists beyond death? She returned her attention to the eggs she was currently preparing. That is absurd, John. Anyway, as you've stated numerous times before, isn't it merely a harmless imaginary friend? She glanced at me over her shoulder. Right, I mumbled, not paying attention. Now, I had other things on my mind. I saw Luke play in his sandbox through the window. Perhaps I ought to spend tonight in Luke's room. Check it out, and make sure that nobody strange is sneaking into our son's bed at night. Really? Doesn't that seem a bit excessive to you? What harm could it cause? Mom would be delighted to have him around for a sleepover on this Friday evening. She can feed him popcorn and sugar cookies as they binge-watch Paw Patrol. Additionally, you can spend a night reading a good book and sipping wine while unwinding in the tub. Even after work is over, you are safe in my house, 'cause Dad will be waiting for you. She made an effort to appear irritated, but I could tell the concept excited her. Her words, "This is ridiculous, are a little hesitant. Time spent alone somewhere has a peaceful effect. It helps have solo activities to plan for. Mom was overjoyed to have Luke stay the night, as I had anticipated. Claire and I had a great evening of takeout pizza and inexpensive wine after she picked him up early that night. While I watched some ridiculous extraterrestrial program on the History Channel, I sent her off to take a bubble bath. By 11 o'clock, I was starting to feel drowsy and was prepared to go to bed. I told my wife that I was going to commune with the dead in my most eerie voice. After putting on my pajamas and brushing my teeth, she was already reading a novel in bed. She whispered absently, "Have fun," and blew me a kiss. I walked down the hall into Luke's room after leaving the comfort of our bedroom. Turning on the overhead light, I had a look around. A huge clown mural on the light blue walls looked back at me with a big, toothy smile. I trembled. The reason my wife chose a carnival theme for his new room is a mystery. Without a certain, nothing was more eerie than a clown. I approached Luke's small bed and his blue-striped bedspread. I would live, but my feet would hang off the end. After crawling into bed, I turned off the elephant-shaped lamp. With the exception of a little nightlight in the corner that resembled a large top, the room was completely dark. The clown was glowing like hell in the mellow red light. How could I have overlooked how fucking eerie this place might get at night? I lay down and do my best to relax and slow my breathing while avoiding the eerie clown. The sound of creaking startled me out of a deep slumber. For a brief period, I struggled to identify my strange surroundings. Correct, Luke's chamber. I wiped the sleep from my eyes and searched the area for the source of the sound. There was an open closet door in the far right corner. When I went to sleep, hadn't it been closed? Luke's small backpack, which was hanging on the doorway, swayed slightly. "Hello?" I muttered hesitantly. "Is anyone there?" Quiet. When I looked to my right, I saw the fucking clown. I definitely needed to discuss that with Claire. The room still looked somewhat confusing because of the eerie red glow from the nightlight. I glanced at the bookcase at the door and the stack of plush animals in the corner of the ceiling. "You're not Luke." I quickly glanced back at the closet. I couldn't even be certain that I heard the voice because it was so quiet. "Who's there?" I spoke softly to the closet. My question was again received with silence. I rubbed my eyes. This was absurd. Why was I in here at all? I was wasting my time worrying about nothing. The creepiest fucking clown in the planet was sleeping next to me, a grown man, in a little bed. I heard it again as I flung back the covers and prepared to swing my legs over the side of the bed. "You're not Luke." I stood motionless. This time, it was undeniable. From the closet, I had heard a voice. I slowly looked toward the dark closet in the corner, as though I didn't want to see. I caught a glimpse of a small, pale face in the red glow of the nightlight. Only the upper half of the face was visible. A matting of dark hair, a grayish-white forehead, and big dark orbs for eyes. I stood half-hidden in the closet, as if it were that of some luridly tall child standing directly behind the wall. "What? The fuck? What were you?" I stumbled. The face didn't move. The eyes hadn't blinked yet, I realized. In the few seconds that followed, I said, "Are you Reggie?" The visage suddenly vanished at the mention of the name, and I heard a fumbling sound emanating from the closet. "Where is Luke?" This time, Luke's name came out of the child's gravelly, irate voice, which was louder and coarser. I was relieved to hear my voice steady this time as I said, "He's not here. What do you want?" For a few seconds there was silence. The voice finally came out, a little softer this time. "Want Luke?" I was startled into a brief period of silence. I said, "You can't have Luke," in a defensive tone. The air crackled and the room abruptly became frigid. The hairs sprang up on the back of my neck. As I opened my mouth to reply, I noticed movement on the closet floor. From this angle, I could see the white face more clearly, and it was back. It was a child's face, but tainted. This was not a youngster. The skin was thin and unhealthy, the eyes were depressed and nearly dry. The black eyes were depressed and nearly dry. The black eyes were ringed by dark circles, the lips curved into a ghastly grin, pallid and bloodless. What shook me the most were the teeth. They were jagged, narrow, and little, as though this horrifying serrated maw had been created by purposefully breaking each teeth. The chin was firmly planted on the ground, and the face was staring at me with a level of rage I had never seen in a child's face. It was an expression of unadulterated anger. After a few seconds of staring, the child monster started to move. "No, don't move! Slithers!" It whispered in an increasingly sibilant voice as it slithered on its belly from the closet, its limbs taut by its torso. As the toddler slithered forward, I retreated as far as I could until I was wedged against Luke's small bed's headboard. Before long, the shoulders and head were hidden. It proceeded to glide lively forward, and soon I could no longer see its pointed white feet. Under the bed was the child. Unsure of what to do, I held onto the tiny mattress with both hands. I had beads of sweat on my forehead, and my heart rate was through the roof. As though it were a crazy bat, the monster underneath clung to the springs from below, causing the mattress to jolt. The little mattress's springs moaned under the additional weight. I felt the monster move slowly, first with one hand, and then with the other, until at last I noticed small, sharp fingernails growing up the edge of the bed. I'm not sure what it means to be paralyzed with fright. I always thought I could muster the wherewithal to get my ass in gear and move when confronted with a roaring monster or axe killer. However, my capacity to move had completely failed me at this point, and I had to watch in silent terror as the small, lifeless hand was joined by another. Unwilling to have that awful child impersonation etched into my retinas, I heard it at that moment.